All right, we are live for the first ever ExitStrategy.World webcast, streaming on X, on YouTube, on Rumble, and maybe even on Twitch as well. I have as our guest today, Isaac Simpson. He leads Will Agency. It is a marketing agency based in Los Angeles, California. And we're going to be talking today about an article he wrote for a friend of his. Some of you know him through Substack, Simplicius76, for his dark Futura Substack called Tutul Glant Looks Left, or Looks Right, excuse me. And as you guys may be aware, this is, like I said, our very first one for all these platforms. And we're going to be talking about what it's like to run an agency in LA and the whole phenomenon of the digital nomad running agencies from around the world and what Isaac's take is on that. So without further ado, Isaac, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Hello. I think it's pronounced Chihulu or Thukulu.
Right. I know it comes from the LP Lovecraft horror novel,
Chulu.
so I don't know how it's pronounced. So
Yeah.
Thank you for the correction.
Chulu.
Or how many pronouns the monster has.
Churro.
Yeah, it's a churro.
It's a churro. It's pronounced churro.
I gotta stop making that bottle noise too. That's probably gonna annoy some people.
Right.
So tell me about what made you decide to start an agency in LA. I mean, for dissonance, as it were. I mean, you could have picked a lot of places in the world to do that, but why Southern California?
Well, I already lived here. That's why I didn't move here to start it. There was no other option. I just started it where I was at the time. So that's why I started it in LA. It was a good place to start it, though. Definitely a smart place to do it.
Okay. And what made you kind of motivated you to write the article? I mean, what did you find fascinating about the whole Super Bowl? What is it? LV? What are we up to? LV3 now?
58.
Yeah, 58.
So, there was this argument going around all the time about Taylor Swift, whether Taylor Swift was a conspiracy or, was a psyop. And I think there was a big misunderstanding on the right. A lot of people on the right kind of said that, oh, it's ridiculous to imagine that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce would be a publicity stunt. And a lot of people really reacted to that in such a way. And they talked about it in such a way that was very
very Greta Thunberg. How dare you?
Yeah. How dare you? Yeah, exactly. How dare you talk about, even a lot of smart people on the right were doing that.
Yeah.
And so I think that just came from a misunderstanding, kind of a deep misunderstanding about the way publicity works and what celebrity is for.
Right.
And I think that they just weren't getting what the more lowbrow parts of the right were saying when they were saying Travis and Taylor are fake, right? And I think that the more lower brow, magatard types who were saying this is definitely fake, they were actually right. They were.
It's like that meme
right.
where the midwit doesn't understand and the low IQ guy gets it and the smart guy gets it.
Well, I think the weird thing, though, about this instance was actually it was here you had more of a disconnect between the dumb guy and the high IQ guy, which you see on the right a lot. I think the intellectual right really sometimes it totally is what you're saying, where they're on the same side as the dumb guy, and then sometimes they're totally not. Right. And this was an instance in which they were not. They were misunderstanding what the dumb guy was saying when the dumb guy was saying this is fake. And really, the dumb guy was correct. It is fake. It's just not fake in the way that the smart guy on the spectrum was thinking that he meant it was fake. And I think if you read my piece, what I'm trying to do is like explain how these things actually happen and why the dumb guy is actually has the better angle of this particular thing.
Right. And I should interject here for the audience that even though this is our very first webcast for ExitStrategy.World, it's not our very first webcast, period, or podcast at all. I mean, I've done some podcasting before this started, and obviously worked very closely with V, the Guerrilla Economist of Rogue News, who is also happens to be the CEO and co-founder of ExitStrategy.World. So we have everything. We have that article linked up in the YouTube comments. You can find it, I believe. So you'll see it there where the comments are for this YouTube stream. So Isaac, tell us what was the angle that you felt kind of made it connect with people, made it go viral? I mean, everybody's kind of on the right, or everybody in the alt media has kind of heard of Edward Bernays before, I would think. You know, it's good old brother Alex Jones talks about it all the time. I mean, you kind of have to acknowledge that's where millions of Americans probably first heard of Edward Bernays. It's not that I'm endorsing Mr. Jones. I'm just saying that is where a lot of people heard about it and about propaganda and his sort of classic treatise. And by the way, was it true about Edward Bernays that he was really the nephew of Sigmund Freud? Is that true?
That's totally true. Yep.
I thought that was kind of made up. That was like conspiracy lore.
No, that's very true.
Okay.
And actually, even before Alex Jones started talking about him, really it comes from Adam Curtis, who's a great documentarian, and his, I think it's Century of the Self. Sometimes I get this wrong, but I think it was Adam Curtis's Century of the Self that starts with the whole expose of Edward Bernays and his connections to Freud and his connections to modern propaganda. And so what I have learned as a person in marketing is that there is absolutely no market or audience for writing or analysis or explanations of marketing. It does not exist. So you have all of LinkedIn. How many thousands of podcasts are stupid, blowhard, normie hype dad marketers pumping hot air into the universe, pretending that there is a market for their really big insights on the marketing world. Yeah, I will tell you, it does not exist. Those people have no audience. They have a pretend audience that they pay for, and they act as if people listen to their podcast because they pay for fake reviews, fake following, fake engagement. And, you know, people like share each other's things when they ask each other to share them, but no one reads it. Absolutely no one reads normie world advice on marketing. It is an absolutely fake market. Absolutely zero.
We were talking right before we went on the air about this too, that LinkedIn is just full. It's like saturated with people who are like, yeah, man, I was broke. Like a year ago, I was living in the van down by the river, and now I got a 7-figure agency through the power of AI. Let me show you.
And let me show you how. I'm the email guy. Do you notice that they put that in there?
How many email guys are there?
Yeah, I mean, no, like they put, because somebody tells them they're just fucking monkeys, and somebody tells them, oh, say you're the blank guy in your Twitter bio, because that's how, you know, you'll have a niche. And so they put that in their Twitter bio, and they think I'm the, you know, the digital targeting after website visit guy. And then they think that that's going to make people
go. They get into niches of niches, and that's, and now we've got coaches for coaching. Right. And by the way, our industry, and this is why I'm kind of hammering on this point, because it seems a little obvious to probably some of the more cynical people in our audience. But I mean, you have a similar issue in our industry, you know, in this whole internationalization and offshoring space. It's kind of like everybody kind of knows everybody, at least by name or X handle. Right. And so it sort of becomes a big circle because you even see like some people, and I'm not naming names, but there are some people that try to like subtweet, other people and kind of drag them a little bit without naming them and saying, well, don't listen to this guy in Paraguay because, he's just trying to make money off of you, paying some Paraguayan lawyer peanuts to register you while he, does whatever. And it's like, listen to me, Argentina is the best place to go. And you're like, really? Okay. I mean, yeah, it's a beautiful country, amazing country, but is Argentina really the best option right now, or is it just a place where you go and you hang out and you go to Patagonia and you enjoy the steak and wine, but not necessarily a place you're going to invest real money and major time in right now, So that's just like one example from our industry, what's going on, what I see going on X, what I see going on kind of in social media in general of the whole internationalization offshoring space, which, by the way, I should mention is kind of has low barriers to entry right now. So there's a lot of like mom and pop or relatively small operations, but then you've got some really decent mid-size operations. And then there's sort of these, I guess you call it Henley and Partners and some of these giant companies up in the UK that are like basically CBI, passport by investment mills, that they're just literally processing like almost tens of thousands per year or something like that, some extreme number.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have to kind of tell me a little bit more about what your whole thing is about, because I actually don't know too much about internationalization or what this is. So,
or offshoring, yeah.
Or offshoring. You'll have to tell me what that is more.
Well, number one, I can tell you what we're not. We don't deal in securities, we don't give tax advice, and we don't give legal advice. So those are kind of the disclaimers to get out of the way. What we do offer people is advice on both strategic relocation of their business and of their assets. So essentially, we are a advisory in fintech and internationalization. Those are kind of the two core businesses we do, and we help people. For example, through our sister company Amparo & Co., which was founded by my CEO Vijay Varghese, we help people vault gold in different parts of the world, large amounts of gold if they want to do that. We help people move assets through Bitcoin, through stable coins, from one country to the other. And we help people with obtaining the right legal structures they need in place through our partners, our back office legal partners, to protect their assets and give themselves the maximum amount of protection possible from, lawsuits, from, let's say, adverse government actions, from severe inflation, hyperinflation, all sorts of things, getting second passport, third passport. If you're from a country that, let's say, is not particularly politically stable right now, that could include the United States of America, which we can talk about in a moment coming forward. Because what your essay really was getting at, I thought, and why I wanted to talk about it, what made it important was not just, okay, Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift. I mean, come on, is that real? It's not just that. It's that the whole point of of the GAE or whatever you want to call it, the empire, the New World Order, whatever. People have different labels for it, different names, but basically the powers that be, the power structures in Hollywood, in high finance, and in pop culture in general, shaping it, that they're trying to regain like middle American wholesomeness. They're trying to win back or woo back at least the people that they've kind of alienated with drag queen story hours, with, all the BLM militancy and all the other crap that's happened since basically everybody kind of lost their friggin' minds in 2020, or at least the establishment lost its mind, so to speak. And you could kind of compare it to almost like some people talk about Nixon's madman theory in international relations, where people are, if you want to nerd out a little bit, where they are, world leaders act more crazy than they are. Like, Netanyahu, he acts more crazy than he is, and the Iranians act more crazy. But then when push comes to shove and it's time for the ordnance to fly, it's time to rumble, like, people are like, what was that? Biggest drone and missile strike in history. And it's like, what did they actually hit? And it's the same with all the Israelis. They're going to have massive retaliation, and they're going to drop the big one on Tehran, right? And it's like, okay, that's another meme that you see on X, like the nothing happening bros, like they seem to be winning thus far, but they only need to be wrong once, and we're all kind of, screwed.
Yeah. No, totally.
So where was I going with it? Oh, I was saying that like you have people who call themselves centrists who are very connected, very dialed into the establishment, but yet they can act crazy woke if they want to. Like they can put it on as a mask, just like international leaders do for their posturing. That was the analogy I was making. So where I was going with that is what you were saying is that it's not really a psyop. It's sort of like you're just manipulating or pushing people, nudging them, if you will, to use that terminology that pudgy, weird, I don't know, very gay, maybe CIA agent was talking about the other day. And that big video that leaked where they talked about how they cut off Alex Jones's legs and, they took away his money with the bajillion dollars defamation suits for Sandy Hook. And like how that was a big part of, how they nudge people to commit crimes, or they say, well, it's not.
What was that? That was a leak. I actually didn't see what you're talking about.
Yeah. There was a video that went viral on X a few days ago where they were talking. There was a hidden camera. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was. Maybe it was James. What's his name? The guy who used to do all
James O'Keefe.
Yeah. James O'Keefe used to do all the hidden camera interviews of Democrats when they get a few drinks in them and they start bragging. They start talking about how badass they are and, how powerful they are. And here's what we can do. And here's what we actually do behind the scenes and so forth, those kind of videos. And he was talking to a guy who had been agency. He was like a contractor for pretty much everybody, FBI, CIA, DHS, and he was bragging about all this stuff and how they kind of got to Alex Jones and they cut off his money. And it was similar because what you're saying is the way it works in the real world is nobody's dictating to these celebrities what to do, but they're kind of nudging them, and they nudge them to a point where some of them feel very controlled and they snap, like what happened with Dave Chappelle or with some other people where they start talking about, the handlers and the crazy people, or the guy who was threatening Kanye was sending him back to the mental institution if you don't play ball and stop doing whatever. So it was I think it was that's kind of the stuff you're talking about. You're sort of peeling back the curtain a little bit, because there's been a lot of talk lately. For some reason, this movie that came out several years ago, it didn't seem to get a lot of play at the time, but it sort of built this cult following over time, sort of like those David Lynch movies like Twin Peaks and Mulholland Drive. And it's called Under the Silver Lake.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you sort of, my analogy was that you did the sort of Under the Silver Lake glance, if you will, or peek behind the curtain with that piece. And that's why it went viral. That's why Dimitri at Rabbit X, who we're going to have on the show probably in the next several weeks, maybe several days from now, he mentioned it, and it got a lot of virality from that, and a lot of other people were talking about it.
Right. I think it just comes that people just really don't understand. Look, there's all kinds of different groups and tribes and stuff, right? And there's this thing that drives me really nuts in our world of the right is so bad at winning any battles at all. It's so bad at it, and it's been so bad at it for so long. And
that's one of the reasons people need us, because they want to start hedging the bets and looking at other countries, because they're like, what's happened to my country, right?
Yeah. And it's just that's so much of the foundation of the new intellectual right. Yet you have these people in our sphere who they get these ideas in their heads about oh, well, we need to appeal to white women aged 22 to 46. And so in order to they have all this data, and they think, well, we really need to appeal to this group. And if we don't appeal to this group, we're going to lose, we're not going to win. And then we're going to have no power and blah, blah, blah. And what they end up doing is they end up convincing themselves of all kinds of practical solutions to things that end up actually hurting the cohesiveness and the power of the right, and I think that you see this a lot with gay stuff, right? It's you see, even Christians are super afraid of saying, why don't I want pride in my neighborhood? Because it's gross. Like they're very afraid of saying, I don't like this because it's disgusting.
Yeah,
because
there was a gay culture, by the way, in first century Rome. I mean, it's not like this has not been around, from the very early church. Just as a minor historical point there.
Sure. I mean, whatever it is. Look, I'm just using this as an example. I'm just trying to say that when it comes to certain things that we should be disgusted by, we're trying to find all these rational explanations for it, right? And I think what Trump has done very well, and as we're saying, what the sort of lower IQ parts of the right have done well in recent past, is they've just stopped trying to explain. They've stopped, I think when you look at a phenomenon like QAnon or Pizzagate, QAnon and Pizzagate are factually, Pizzagate, who knows? Pizzagate, there's probably some truth to Pizzagate. Who knows what it actually is? I mean, that one guy was definitely a pedo, but it's like, who knows how far? I don't think Hillary Clinton was murdering children in the basement of Comet Pizza, but QAnon is pretty much entirely false, right? And
I'm of those camp that I think QAnon was a psyop. I think it was like playing the right. In fact, I would go as far as to say, if you go all the way back to what was that exercise, Jade Helm, where they got everybody like freaked out about Jade Helm, that was totally a psyop.
What was it called?
Jade Helm, the military exercise in North Carolina and around the U.S. that was happening in the late Obama years, where people started freaking out and saying, "Is this the Obama military takeover of the United States?" Blah blah blah. It's like, guys, this is just another regular exercise, but they're deliberately hyping it to get you so that they get the idea in the minds of vets and of military people that, the right doesn't like the military, doesn't trust the military. Like, that's all it is. It's just a wedge, your classic wedge psyop to manipulate people, right? Get one group kind of worked up or to dislike or distrust another group of people. Like, that's all
I
it
think
was.
that's mostly what they do is draw those wedges. I think that's very true. Is that most of the stuff that they do is trying to draw these divisions and these wedges. And I think that there's just no immune system left to stop this. And I think a lot of the trans stuff is that too. It's whether you want to call it a dialectic or a wedge. Basically the purpose is to start the argument. The purpose is not actually to, make the world better for trans people. The purpose is to divide and to create an argument and to create an opportunity for power, which is what Orrin McIntyre would say, quoting Nick Land. So in any case, this all comes back to why was this feeling like something that I had to address, because again, I think that the true heart and soul of this movement is the dumb right. Trump rose not because of intellectual rightists. In fact, every intellectual rightist was pretty much wrong about Trump, right? All of our smart guys, all of our smart leaders, none of them were the ones who understood Trump at first. They all came.
Maybe Peter Thiel was kind of the exception. There were a few people on that, let's say, high IQ end of the meme who kind of jumped on the Trump wagon train.
So early. I don't know when Thiel jumped in. So maybe huge credit to him if he jumped in early enough that this was he deserves credit for this. I don't know when he jumped in, but from what I saw, almost all of them jumped in at a certain point, but it took a little bit of them figuring out why, right?
But this is what a lot of people don't understand, Isaac, is that it's not that Thiel jumps on the Trump train because he loves Trump personally. No, it's not even that. It's just it's like getting a stock on a stock early that is going to go through the roof, right? Or getting on a meme coin and watching it rocket, and Trump in 2016, he was like a meme coin, Yeah.
Yes, he was a meme coin. I think that's a great, Thiel was looking at it from an investor's standpoint, which was not the same as somebody who actually believed like me. So I liked Trump from the very beginning. because I actually believed, and because I also have a sense, like I'm kind of a poor guy in my soul. So like, and in reality, or formerly in reality. So like, as somebody who
You're
grew up,
not making Dimitri-sized bank, in other words.
not making Demetrius size bank, but doing quite well now. I mean, Will is actually a pretty successful business so far. Every moment I'm afraid that that's not going to be true anymore. But so, as somebody who grew up with very little, or, at least, I have kind of an odd upbringing in a lot of ways, but it's somebody with exposure to a lot of, not somebody who was privileged in the ways that most of the people that I'm around today were.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. I mean, just
Yeah.
by the fact that you're managing to stay in LA, I mean, the affluence of the people around you has probably considerably gone up because a lot of the starving actor demographic has kind of been pushed out anyway from a lot of areas. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm in a unique situation because I come from sort of the end of two lines, one Jewish and one Christian, but sort of the kind of like dregs of two families that were pretty successful for a while. So most of the people I was around in certain circumstances were quite privileged. I was not. I was a total wigger growing up, so I hung out with like all black kids. I was from a pretty like black neighborhood, and then I went to GW, which is like rich Jewish kid central. So I've really like spanned the gamut of class. I've really been
let's
in
just
a lot
say
of
about
different
that. We used to hang out with Ben Shapiro back before he was kind of a household name. I'll just leave it at that. And at what's his name, Jack Abramoff's house. One summer as summer interns, we used to hang out there and watch movies. His wife was around. He was never around. I don't know. We never saw him, but yeah.
Nice.
Stack's
Cool.
Deli, the whole thing. Yeah, it was interesting time, but we'll talk about that off the air some other time.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
but it can also relate to your earlier point about having grown up pretty close, even if we weren't, let's say, underprivileged. Having gone to school on the other side of the tracks, so to speak, you could say. I think my high school was about 80% black and maybe 10% Asian.
Well, and just having a consciousness of it, like having a consciousness of what the common person is experiencing, what they're driving, and growing up in the black community is actually very similar to the MAGA poor white person community, right? I mean, it's kind of the same. No, it's not the same, but there's a lot of similarities in terms of how they see the world.
Because they're both from the South. I mean, a lot of them.
It's Southern. Similar. It's like very much like machismo. It's no gay shit. No fucking, they're gonna say what's on their mind, right? They're not gonna bullshit.
It's not constant status consciousness.
Exactly. They're not gonna.
They don't have the status consciousness that upper middle class people have, who have the worst status anxiety, by the way. Because
actually, so it's interesting. I wrote another piece about this in American Mind. So there's a guy named Paul Fussell who wrote a book called Class in the 1980s. That's the best book about American class ever written by far. People.
I'm familiar with The Great War in modern memory because that's what most people know Paul Fussell for.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, yeah. That was his other thing.
Yeah,
so he wrote a book called Class.
And how educated people, even the common working class people who got sent to the trenches, that they were writing this beautiful, flowery, calligraphy, practically letters home from the front lines. I think Ernst Jünger was kind of. I mean, I think Ernst Jünger was kind of an extreme outlier, obviously, in terms of IQ. He was a brilliant guy compared to your average German Lancer, on the Western Front. But I do have to say that, there were a lot of people like him, though. I mean, from that generation who ended up just like, I don't know, sitting in the French Foreign Legion in the 50s because, it wasn't a problem if you were, on the other side during World War II, as long as you didn't. It was the French who volunteered, for the SS Nordland. What was it called? The Charlemagne Division, who were the last defenders to die in the Reichstag, and the French had them shot. That's why they died in the Reichstag, because they knew they were condemned if they went back to France. But the Germans, if they surrendered, they joined the Foreign Legion. They sent them off to Vietnam. A lot of the guys who were at Dien Bien Phu in Vietnam were German officers. Little known fact, like, and in Algeria too. So what I'm trying to say is that Fussell made a point about just how much human potential was there, how much education was lost, like what we lost as a Western civilization. When you think about how educated the ordinary person was even back then, right? Maybe they weren't educated in the way that we're web savvy and, we've got all our gadgets and everything now. We've got the internet to look up anything we want and YouTube how-to videos, but they were both smarter in the mechanical and in the literary sense than the average today. I mean, not even close in those areas of IQ, I would say, and actual functional intelligence, applied intelligence.
Right.
In terms of their ability to fix things, build things, plant things, and read and know literature, truly. The canon of Western civilization. They knew it, the Bible especially. Mm-hmm. So go ahead. Sorry, we got off on that tangent about Fussell, The Great War of Modern Memory, but you were talking about Class that he
published. Well, he has this book called Class that is, like about the varying classes in America. And you were saying that, the most status conscious class is the upper middle class. So he would say that that's actually not true. He would say that in the 1980s, everybody wanted to be upper middle class, right? And the reason for that is because the upper classes were, one, constantly being threatened by people taking their shit, and two, they weren't like bohemian or educated. Like he goes through all these examples of upper class people being very dull and very
like the Millionaire Next Door, for example, the Mormons who, or the Indian family that owns a chain of, I don't know.
No, because that would actually be middle class, according to him.
Okay.
Even the actual upper class, right? The people who are literally the rich elites are dull, right? And that's actually true. In my experience, again, I've done so much class jumping around. It is actually true. The higher up you go from the middle, the less people want to talk about ideas.
Right.
Like if you go into a place with like really, really bright middle class professors and lawyers and they're going to want to talk about ideas all day long, right?
Yeah. The most amusing thing for me on X in terms of Dunning-Kruger, my favorite example of Dunning-Kruger on X is probably all the lawyers who are talking about the Russia-Ukraine war. Like, oh, if we just do this, we just, take out the bridge this and this way, or they do more of these special ops raids, like they'll totally beat the Russians. It's like hilariously, Dunning-Kruger in the sense that they have no clue what they're talking about. They don't even understand what they don't know. You'd be better off talking to like a 12-year-old about the war, honestly, and getting them to understand it from watching, I don't know, 1917 or something, a few war movies, than you would. And by the way, that was one of the other goofy things about 2020, by the way, when you had all these Antifa guys running around and like somebody gets hit with a rubber bullet or something and they all scream medic, like they all saw Saving Private Ryan as kids. So they know how to scream medic. I don't think they saw Platoon, like I think it all came from Saving Private Ryan. It's just goofy. Anyway, you were saying about, I keep taking things off of tangents and you keep going down the tracks here with your train of thought. How the upper middle class, you're correct. Sometimes the more money people have, the more dull it is. In Latin America, in a lot of other parts of the world, it's pretty much the same thing. Like a lot of the guys who are minigarchs in Russia are people who own, let's say, companies that don't necessarily do sexy things. We're talking about ferrous metals, steel making, oil and gas, whatever it is, that made minigarch money. And it's kind of the same thing in the US. Like a lot of the guys who .com made money. There are people like, I think, Musk, who are genuinely really smart and really broad in their understanding of how the world works. And then there's maybe guys like Mark Cuban that, sure, Mark Cuban above average IQ, definitely. But would you say off the charts about Mark Cuban? Probably not.
It's more just that the higher up you go genuinely into the elites, the more it is taboo to discuss ideas.
Right.
Like if you go hang out with some true oligarch or some true elite, they're not going to try to talk to you about ideas. They're going to try and talk to you about their dogs. They're going to try and talk to you about their sailboat. They'll try and talk to you about sports. They don't want to talk. It's uncomfortable for them to talk about.
And it's the same in LATAM, by the way. You'd be talking about the finca or about the harvest or, about their grandchildren or, about their dogs as well or their horses. Like, it would be the same thing.
Yeah, they're not going to talk to you about, racism in America. That's like that. That's not gonna. That's like uncomfortable for them. And it's largely because, anyway, look, we don't need to get into that.
Well, do you think that what's happened is that one group of oligarchs is, let me ask you this. Do you think that it's about like one group of oligarchs sort of uncorked the bottle and the genie got out in 2020 just to get rid of Trump? They got so desperate to get rid of Trump, they started doing all this color revolution shit in the United States. They brought the color revolution tactics of Gene Sharp home from abroad. They brought the revolution home, so to speak. And now they're trying to put the beast back in the cage because they've let the crazy left out run wild too much. That's one common thing you hear on the intellectual right? Is that Soros and all these people went too far and now they've got to dial it back.
Yeah, I think that's true.
You think that essentially is true? Okay.
I don't think that's why they're dull, but I think what you said is true. I don't think that's. Again, Paul Fussell was saying this in the 1980s. So
right. But a lot of things have changed since the 80s. I feel like half of America is still living in the 80s or 90s. Like, a lot of Republicans are just like, we got to do what Reagan would have done in this situation. Like, Reagan's been in the ground for 20 years, guys. And then you have the Democrats who still think it's 1999 and, NATO is so all powerful and Russia's so weak. They can just drop bombs in some Russian aligned country and get away with it. And it's like, no, guys, the world has changed. The last weekend was a proof of that, right?
Yeah.
They're like 99% intercept rate, except for those 4 missiles that hit that air base in the Negev, like, okay. But they didn't do that much damage. Here, this is just one crater. We patched it. Hey, everything's fine.
What do you think is going to happen? Do you think there's going to be a war?
Well, I didn't really. I did mention, I think, in the show notes that I sent over to you, we could. I think I sent that to Dima, though, Dimitri, not to you, but because he was going to be on today, just as an explanation for the audience, guys, that this was supposed to be a 3-way show where we were going to have Dimitri of RabbitX on the program. We had rescheduled him maybe once or twice earlier on Rogue, but actually, no, I wanted to say that my personal opinion is that they'll try to keep it sort of at the level it is now, where it's sort of this, like, it's no longer a proxy war, but it's not World War III yet, where we're sort of in between, I guess you could say. We're still trying to fight World War III by proxy, but we're running out of Ukrainians to do it with. And it never, I will say this, it seems like, and you see this on X all the time, but it really does seem to be true about a lot of the people in Washington, especially in London too, that it really never occurred to them that you could fight the mother of all proxy wars with Russia and Ukraine, and Russia would use allies. It would use, especially the Iranians, to begin to overstretch and strike back at the U.S. and, Israel, not directly, but indirectly by, what's going on in the Red Sea with the Houthis. It's like, oh, we're just going to pour all these weapons into Ukraine. It's going to be badass. We're going to kill all these Russians. It's going to be great. And it's like, guys, you got troops in Syria and these FOBs that are very exposed to missile and drone attack. You've got the Red Sea situation where essentially the Saudis threw everything they had at the Houthis and they had to finally give it up. The UAE gave it up early on. They figured it out faster because they're smarter than the Saudis. And then you had the whole, it's like, do people understand that when you're dealing with a peer or even a near peer, it's not just about, how hard you punch the other guy and how much damage you think you're doing to him. It's about how much pain and can you take a punch to the face when they hit back. To quote Mike Tyson, is my favorite military philosopher, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And Israel kind of got punched in the face this weekend. Not in terms of loss of life, but in terms of loss of military prestige, let's say.
Wait, why prestige, though?
Well, I mean, just in terms of the realization that they're vulnerable, and like this was a fraction of the Iranian arsenal. Like they didn't use, people would try to, oh, it was the biggest missile and drone attack in history. Yes, it was, and that was like 1% of their drone and missile arsenal that they used. They got thousands of them, and they used like a couple hundred drones and maybe a bunch of cruise missiles. Their older model, they got shot down, and then they had the ballistic missiles. So it was kind of like, it was kind of like chess, where the pawns sort of move forward, and you use the pawn, and the cheap drones are like the pawns, and then they pave the way for the knights, which are the cruise missiles, and then the ballistic missiles are like your bishops and your rooks. And it's sort of like that chess analogy, and it just seems to me like right now there's sort of this panic that's setting in certain circles, but there's still I still see a lot of smug, arrogance, and a lot of the Israelis can't really afford that anymore. I think NATO still can, because they've got the Ukrainian meat shield between them and Russia and the whole nuclear thing to kind of prevent it from getting too far. But at the same time, look, we're a country with wide open borders. Some of those people who came in happen to be Chinese. I'm not trying to get on the lower IQ right here again, but I think the Chinese would frankly be kind of derelict in their duties if they weren't at least inserting some MSS operatives, under the guise of dudes who just want to run a restaurant or something, just want to run a livery service in Manhattan, right? It's not like when you're a country with wide open borders and rickety infrastructure like the United States, and you want to sit there and gloat about stuff getting blown up in Russia. It's like, dude, it's almost like you're inviting nemesis. And what happened today in Scranton, in that Joe Biden's hometown, right, where they have the big shell factory? There was a fire. And people are like, oh, maybe it was Russian sabotage. No, it wasn't Russian sabotage. It's just probably a plant that's running by a bunch of, people in their mid-50s who've been doing it who got hired in the 80s to do it. And they're running on 3 shifts. And, the physical, let's say, infrastructure of the plant is not in such great shape. And they probably just had an accident. Some spark hit something and kaboom, right? It's just like, do people understand? Do they get it that war is a continuation of politics by other means? What does that politics involve? That's what Clausewitz said, and they quoted that in what was that movie? Not The Hunt for Red October, the other submarine movie, Crimson Tide. Crimson Tide, where they're having this discussion in the boardroom, right, of the captain's quarters or whatever. They're in his dining room, and they're having a discussion about Clausewitz and nuclear war. And the Denzel Washington character says, the real enemy can't be defeated. It's war itself, right? And they play the music in the background and everything. That's like the old Hollywood view. The new Hollywood view is like, we're going to show the Ruskies who's boss, and nuclear weapons, BFD, It's like people used to have a real fear of nuclear war that was so big in the 1980s. It's such a part of the pop culture that actually carried over through the Terminator movies and through other, other things, like even in Jericho after 9/11, right? That TV series. And now it's sort of like it's all gone away. Nobody's scared of nuclear war anymore. Nobody's supposed to be, because if you're scared of nuclear war, you're giving into the riskies. You're showing weakness, and we can't tolerate that right now. It's just all a question of will. No, it's not just a question of will. It's also a question of your defense industrial base. It's a question of how many people are really willing to fight and die alongside the Ukrainians, right? Because that's really the $1 million question. It's not just a matter of ramping up production, if that can be done, even at a very expensive level. Like, say, in Germany, what are they buying an artillery shell for now? Like 8,000 euros an artillery shell. And in Russia, it's probably like $800 equivalent in rubles. That's a problem. Or when you're using $1 million missile to shoot down a $25,000 Shahad drone, if that's a problem, right? Because that's a differential of cost attrition. Cost attrition loses wars, right? Why did the Allies crush Nazi Germany? Among other reasons, because even if some of the German tanks were better qualitatively, they couldn't crank out as many of them. And, the Sherman T-34 was good enough to win, right? In fact, the T-34 was a really good tank. It wasn't always at as huge a disadvantage as portrayed. But the point being that, quantity has a quality all its own. Well, which side has the quantity on their side? The Eurasian axis has the quantity. They've got China, Iran, North Korea, Russia right now. And we've got all this sort of boutique arms manufacturing. We're talking about, we're going to send 75 Caesar guns. The French announced this. Macron, he was like, we're going to send 75 Caesar guns to Ukraine. Like, that's probably what the Russians are destroying in like 2 or 3 months. Or they said, Raytheon announced, we're going to make 550 missiles this year, intercept missiles, which sounds really impressive, right? That's probably what Ukraine, that's probably something like Israel fired off maybe half that amount last night or whatever this weekend, right? One huge raid. And Ukraine probably fires that off in like 2 months, even if they're conserving them. They're being very conservative, right? So it's like there's a total disconnect from both the industrial production side, defense industrial base, because it's been hollowed out by years of outsourcing, including even for some of the rare earths dependency, reliance on China. And you've got, on the other side, this complete political disconnect between, let's say, the governors and the governed, and including whether they're going to have their sons go fight for Ukraine, right? And I tell these pro-Ukraine vets some of this all the time. Like, I talk to some of them, like, guys, are you ready to answer the question? Back when I was growing up, we heard these sort of apocryphal stories about Vietnam vets getting spit on by dirty hippies. And I'm starting to suspect that a lot of that was just made up to make people hate the anti-war movement more, make them think they were all Hanoi chains and stuff. Because I think about that now and I think, well, how many vets coming back from Ukraine, once it's more or less admitted that we've got advisors over there ready for somebody to ask them, not on X, but to their face, hey, how many Waffen SS Galician tattoos did you see over there that the Ukrainians had on them? Or how many of them were really doing that? LARPing as Wehrmacht, with Balkan cruises on their vehicles and stuff like that. I mean, they're not prepared psychologically, in my opinion, a lot of the pro-Ukraine vets to really encounter people who are not necessarily hostile to Ukrainians as a people, but are hostile to the Ukrainian government and to the mission, because they viewed Ukraine as sort of like a redemption story, a redemption arc, after the failures of Ukraine and of Iraq and Afghanistan, right? This was like the good war. We finally had what Studs Terkel called another good war, right? But it's not a good war, and a lot of people are starting to wake up and realize what's really going on,
Yeah.
Sorry, I got on a very extended riff there. That was I kind of been waiting to get all that off my chest, as you could tell, for the audience. But why don't we bring it back, since we've got about 13 minutes we're coming up on the full hour of recording. Why don't we bring it back to your agency and what kind of clients you work with, and what you enjoy best about it, and finally, what are your thoughts? Could you do what you do from anywhere in the world, or you like being in LA? I mean, that's where because you need that face-to-face contact with your clients.
Well, I mean, we do a bunch of different clients. We kind of have a specialty in media, I would say.
Would it be media placement or media buying?
No, we don't do either
Paid
of
or
those.
earned media.
Yeah, that's obviously a confusing answer. No, I don't mean either of those, which is more of a typical type of media. We kind of have been building media companies of various types, because I think inherently when people are getting involved in the parallel economy, media is the instinctual first move, because you want to either build a platform or a publisher that is free speech or based in some way. So we do a lot of media building, sort of like new media companies, that kind of thing. And like platforms, we've done a lot of work for platforms. But we also have all kinds of clients. I mean, we have metal manufacturers. Some of my first clients were very kind of like, blue collar, kulak type businesses of based guys who just found me on Twitter.
Yeah.
Right now, we've been so busy, we really need to release some of the work that we've been doing. A lot of it is sort of, we just hasn't been released yet, just by the nature of it. So yeah, we kind of have full plate now, but What's really best about it, I'll tell you, man, this is like when you start a business, you start to realize that your job as a businessman is to create an environment and a lucrative profit center for your employees, you know? And I don't think I even really thought this when I launched the business, but the greatest like pleasure and the greatest like the reason why people who start businesses get rewarded by both God and the American financial system is because you're benefiting the world. You're benefiting the people around you. You're giving people money, and people need money. And I'll tell you, there is no better feeling in the world than giving people money for being based and for exiting.
I love that. Giving people money for being based. I got to repeat that.
Yeah, it's like it's for exiting the world. It's for literally.
This is the part of the show, by the way, we're probably going to clip.
Not exiting the world, sorry, but for exiting a disgusting and rotten regime that wants to sow ugliness into the entire world.
I love that. Yeah, I love what you're saying here.
An uglier, shittier, much more evil world. And so it feels
our motto
so good
is our company is create your own free world. We trademarked it. I mean, well, we submitted it at the USP Patent Trade Office. It's pending right now, patent pending. But I mean, yeah, that is very remarkably close to our mission statement. Because when I sat down to write a mission statement for ESW, this was probably end of August before we registered as a company in Wyoming. I remember writing something along the lines of, at ExitStrategy.World, we believe that the benefits of multiple jurisdictions, multiple I basically wrote the benefits of multiple jurisdictions and offshoring should not be reserved exclusively for the ultra wealthy and the largest corporations. Basically, can we democratize a lot of what is done for people on the very, very high end of the high net worth scale to other people and create options for people? So yeah, you can sort of normalize it. Yeah, maybe I am going to take the family down to Mexico and put them in schools down there. And like, what? Well, that's crazy. They'll get killed by the cartels. Or, you have all this normalcy bias that keeps people sort of in a particular frame and keeps people from seeing all the options out there. And that's why people used to talk during the last Cold War about the free world, and the leader of the free world, President Reagan or whoever that is the president of the United States. And we came up with the slogan, create your own free world. And I think the ethos you're talking about is remarkably similar because I feel responsible for working with some of our employees that we have in different places around the world. We've got a lead editor in a MENA editor in Cairo, Egypt, and they had a devaluation, and I was like, he came to me and he's like, hey, we need to raise. I'm like, okay, we can do it. We're just going to change the article format here, and we're going to do something different than what we were doing before. We're not going to do long form. We're going to do shorter form. And it was like, okay, great. So it was, I do feel responsible for the team. I don't just feel responsible for myself because I'm a part of this now. It's something that is an extension of yourself. It's not like working for a paycheck for somebody else, right? Like the business is part of who you are.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true. And that's not something that you can really know until you've done it. Right. I think that this is something that like really education does not serve young men in this way well at all. Like starting a business is the best thing if you're a young man who is angry and frustrated with the world and pissed off at the way things are, and wants to say something and, wants to be a thug and like a gangster and, doesn't like this like gay ass fucking longhouse working environment, start a business. That is the answer. like the answer to your problems really is starting.
And it doesn't have to be in this country. It's preferable that it's in this country. We want young based men starting businesses in this country by all means. Please God, yes. But we also are open to, there are certain situations, certain trades where it makes sense to say go east or go south, young man, and find your waifu,
sure. I mean,
find
I'm
your
not saying
Latina.
you have to do it in
Right.
America. Like, you can do it anywhere, and I think like doing it in other places might be good too. But I think a lot of people are really lost. A lot of young guys are really lost and really frustrated and feel really pointless, and like life is completely pointless, and like really there is so much to be said for starting your own business. It's like that is like the last thing you're still allowed to do in the Western world that is like really similar to starting a war band or something. It's like it's so much of like the pressures that you feel that are going unsatisfied. Really, it's just like starting a business. That's how you satisfy those instincts that you have to strive and scramble and work with your friends on some really intense project, and to wake up every morning and sink or swim. Like all of those things are satisfied by starting a business.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is good stuff, man. We're going to have you back on since we've got about 5 minutes left. I only wanted to do a full stream hour, but we're definitely going to have you back on. And we're also, as I mentioned earlier in the program, going to have Dimitri from RabbitX on, because he's not only, he not only has a particular exchange that has certain liquidity, but also he's working on some other things behind the scenes that, are very similar to what our founder, Vijay Varghese, V the Grill Economist, he wanted to do a few years ago. He wanted to set up his own exchange, and he just ran into so many obstacles with the SEC and everything else that it was just like, it was not even worth doing. And he's mentioned this on the Rogue Show before, so I'm mentioning something that's already been mentioned in public. But the point being that absolutely what you're saying, that there is an inherent male drive to seek the tribal affiliation of other males. And if you can't do that in your own physical meat space, to do it online, and we see it all the time everywhere, that's the real yearning is, and behind a lot of these memes. And you're absolutely right that the best way to satisfy them in our current world is to form a business and start working with other people, start recruiting them on the basis of affinity, and then help them build equity in the business as well.
Yeah, totally, man. I totally agree.
So with our last sort of 3 or 4 minutes on the program today, and this has been a really, I think we got off to a bit of a rough start. It had been a while. I guess the rust was showing for me. I've done podcasts before with groups and as a guest, but I'd never actually flown solo as a host before today. So hopefully I didn't do too badly for a rookie. But what else would you say as sort of your final thoughts? Because it's hard to top the one you just had, but where do you see what is going on with agencies? Where do you see this going in terms of both, let's say, mobility, in terms of what you can do with them around the world in different places, and in terms of the type of clients you had? Because you mentioned earlier that you had some real, blue collar guys who'd started out maybe on the factory floor, in the shop floor, in the metals industry. I think you mentioned as some of your first clients. So.
Well, no, I mean, we had a metal manufacturer.
A manufacturer, you're right.
Well, a fabricator, actually.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the thing is, in marketing, like, marketing is a weird industry. There's so many, branding in particular is a strange industry because it's a service industry, right? So you're pitching for clients, but there's so many clients out there, man. There's just endless amounts of clients. There's so many industries, and they all need marketing, and they all need different types of marketing. And, I mean, in today's world, like, everything is marketing now,
Do you think that AI is going to super empower the individual agency marketer? I mean, I don't know how many employees you have under your umbrella, but go ahead.
I think that it'll replace like the Fiverr writer. I think that that's basically what AI will do. Like when you just need trash writing, I think actually AI is going to be great for me, because if all you need is a little bit of like everybody thinks they're a writer, everybody thinks they're a creative. The entire world is clogged with, artificial intelligence, people who are already artificially intelligent, and all they do is just parrot, what they see on Twitter. That's why I've been having a bunch of success with these tweets of just, our chicken sandwiches are, on fleek. They're the goat, or whatever the stupid word of the day is. Like that's what most copywriting is. And people get way overpaid to do this very dumb copying sort of copywriting. Whereas AI will hopefully replace all of that type of thinking. Whereas people who actually have original thoughts, that's a much smaller range of people. So people like me who, we do really original work. I think that will be the ones that survive versus a lot of creatives that aren't really creative will hopefully be, overtaken.
Country boy can't survive.
Yeah.
Alex Jones used to play that a lot on his show. Yeah. Somebody I was talking to actually this week, a gentleman named Mauricio Andres Peña Barrena in Mexico, the Mexican law firm, was talking about this very thing because I had quoted him. I didn't even know who he was. I just found some of his tweets on X, and I quoted him that he posted on March 29, 2024, where he talked about some thoughts on the future of LATAM bros, AI and online work. And he said, currently, the majority of our activities focus on transactional law and foreign direct investment. This is not an accident. And he said immigration and I think he meant by gringo remote workers to Mexico, digital nomads, is still thriving, but we know it all. But we know it will soon die. In many ways, the mechanisms that fuel global geo-arbitrage and prompted us to launch Outbound 2 years ago are in grave danger. Relying on assisting digital nomads, remote workers, and online business travel bros is a risky long-term gamble for Outbound. AI and recession will wipe them out in less than 4 years. We are confident of this. And he wrote, Outbound has spent practically all of its incomes in AI-related startups, and the degree of innovation we're seeing in the industry right now is nerve-wracking. 4 clients with large online enterprises have already told us that their e-commerce, marketing, and copywriting businesses, which were generating millions for them just 18 months ago, are being wiped out. Not a recession-style decline, but something much worse. The market is becoming saturated with emerging B-level guys who can now accomplish considerably more with far less. Competition is harsh. Those who are considering geo-arbitrage or fleeing the global north should do it now while their internet sources of income are still viable. For those who are already in this space, diversify in industries that are more difficult to destroy by AI. Real estate, local enterprises, tourism, restaurants, and so forth. The age of internet revenues may witness one more surge with AI, only before everything goes crash. Stay safe. So there you have it. I did have to quote that just to kind of get that into the picture because, that was really sobering for me to read. And certainly it should be sobering for all the LinkedIn, solopreneur bros as well to read something like that, especially when he's talking about people who have already moved to Mexico or moved to Paraguay or someplace where they've got lower overhead, than obviously yourself there in LA. So it's like, that's a really important point. And I think like you said, it's about passion. It's about what you have to say that's distinct and what you have to say that makes, let's say, an established industry like metalworking or something like that makes it more come alive and more relevant to people in their lives. So as a marketer. So I wanted to thank you for coming on. We're about to wrap up here. We're coming up on the 105, I think, hour and 5 minutes mark. So any final thoughts, Isaac?
Nope, but thank you so much for having me. And and I'd love to hear more about everything you've gotten going on as well, because it sounds like you've got a lot of cool thoughts about things. So yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. And we'll hope to have you back on in several weeks, maybe in a few months. And we'll definitely have your friend Dimitri on as well very soon.
Cool. Sounds good, man. Peace.
All right. Peace out.